Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The X. I'm Brenda Rigney, your host today. I'm also your dream business coach, and I'm so excited. Like, this is actually fangirl moment here. I have been following this woman for a while, and I've attended some of her live sessions, and I'm so happy that she agreed to be on my podcast today. Her name is Emily Anne Brant. Emily is an Indigenous author, speaker, and mentor. Welcome, Emily. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I had to put that in there because it's like, I actually put out not a dare in a like an awful way, but just kind of a challenge to members of my community, some of my clients that I work with and members about, going out there and pitching your dream podcast, your dream client.
Oh,
Like, who is that person? And I'm like, everyone was asking me, and I'm like, Emily Anne Brant, I need to get
oh,
her on the podcast. So that was Friday. And then I literally, I got your message about your upcoming roundtable, which we'll talk about with everybody in our session today. And I reached out to you and you said yes. So
yeah, and here we are. Thank you. I
yeah.
love the alignment, and I'm very, very excited to be here. So I'm really glad that you reached out and asked.
So it was like about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I came across your content and you were talking about decolonizing coaching, the personal development space. So I just want to get into that today. I mean, we're going to talk about how you work with your clients. I want to know a little bit about your business, but really, you can tell me and steer us in a different direction, but I believe your purpose on this planet is to help us understand what does decolonization actually look like in coaching and the personal development space, but also even as business owners, what does that look like? And so could you kind of define that for us, give us some background into that?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for that reflection too. It's interesting because it's such a specific thing. When I tell people who, like, for example, at business networking events or whatever, if I tell them, oh, I help coaches and healers and space holders decolonize their practice, they're like, whoa, that's so specific. But I'm like, yeah, and that's kind of why it's so magical. Because as soon as people hear, they're really intrigued and they're like, oh yeah, this industry does need decolonization, but I would like what I hear a lot is that I wouldn't necessarily have thought to put that language to it. Like that's what people often say when they come across my work or the roundtable or the free ebook. They're like, I knew something needed to shift in the coaching and personal development space. I knew something felt off. I knew something felt icky, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was until I saw you saying it needs to be decolonized.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, we can spend the roundtable is a 2-day presentation unpacking what that actually means and what that actually looks like. But essentially, if you think back to the roots of coaching and personal development as an industry, so not the actual Indigenous roots of it, because coaching and mentorship really goes back to a lot of BIPOC and Indigenous cultures. We have our elders. We have we would go see an oracle or a seer, as we call them in my culture. So it's not as if, settler folks invented coaching, but
Right.
coaching as we know it today, right, as an industry, as this big I think it's multi-billion dollar industry that it is
15
now.
billion, 15 billion, I think it's
Oh
got.
my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
2025
a
projections.
it's a huge industry, right? And it's been, of course, capitalized on and continues to be capitalized on. And I'm part of that as well. I'm making money as a coach. But the roots of this, as we know it as an industry, are very white male, very colonial approach, very the whole industry was created for and by middle to upper class white folks. So people with, certain levels of access, certain levels of privilege,
Sure.
even the ability to focus on developing yourself as a person versus trying to pay the bills because you have to work 3 different jobs or work against whatever systemic barriers you might be up against. Like even if you look at it that way, it's a privilegey thing, right? To focus
Oh,
on self-development.
yeah, even when I was in my corporate days, like I used to be an executive and we would bring in coaches, consultants to work with our executive teams or mid-level management around strategy or personal development, leadership development. And no offense to the old white guy, but they were all old white guys that had been
Yeah.
in the organization longer. So when we're talking about changing organizations, becoming more diverse in our leadership, more inclusive of BIPOC leaders or influencers in our business, but we're still hiring the old white guys that taught us those, corporate structures before, we're just repeating the past versus, creating something that's for the future, what the next generation really wants and what we need to have in our organizations. So
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I've lived it, but it wasn't until you talked about it that I was like, oh yeah, like we just keep repeating it and we keep like feeding ourselves the same storyline. And I love what you said too about, a lot of the things that are say in coaching practices, like as far as an Indigenous person, they would go back to, their elders, the oracle, shaman, medicine people that would deliver medicine. I mean, even when we think about in Western medicine, where I live in Western Canada, you're in Eastern Canada, but our BC medical system just acknowledged acupuncture and Chinese medicinal practices as being something that's accepted now in like the health authorities in British Columbia.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, but that has been going on longer than Western cultural medicine has been in, like med schools in North
Mhm.
America or med schools in Europe. So,
Yeah. Yep. And
thank you for
yeah,
acknowledging it. But like, I don't think that the Chinese acupuncturist specialist is sitting there going, oh, thank you. Like, like it's been in my family or in our community for thousands of years. So,
yeah, yeah,
mhm.
exactly. And then we do see some of these ancient and very healing modalities that are often brought into the coaching and more so like the spiritual wellness spaces. And then there's a lot of appropriation that happens there versus appreciation, which we could get into. There's so many directions we can go with this conversation, Brenda. So
Yeah,
you might
well,
have
I
to
mean,
stop me from the rabbit holes.
no, it's okay because I've heard you in the roundtable discussions talk about manifestation. And
Yeah,
manifestation, like the whole concept of that was introduced to me when I was like, a junior level manager in an organization leading teams. And like we have to manifest our strategic goals for the quarter along with SMART goals, like all these things. And it was like, oh
mhm.
yeah, okay. And then you actually, and then I did hear it because I did go to India and I worked with a Reiki specialist, and and they filled me in. And this is actually in a lot of cases. I mean, many indigenous cultures around the world practice some type of manifestation, but
Yeah,
even like the Hindu culture, there's a
yeah,
special way that they do it, and it's been appropriated into Western office
yeah.
protocol. So,
Yes, but then it's called, so it's embraced, yes, not in the medical system, but by this more spiritual, holistic sort of wellness
mhm,
community. But then these practices are often called woo-woo. So people
right.
will say, oh, I'm into all the woo-woo stuff. And they kind of see it as like playful or almost like, yeah, being playful, but it's downplaying your own work when you say
Mhm.
something like, oh, this is woo-woo. But B, it's discrediting and disrespecting the ancient, sacred, indigenous practices from which and peoples from which this comes from. So that's another thing I often talk about is just, and I'm a communicator. I work in inclusive communications for a university, so I'm always paying attention to language and how much words really matter. And I've always noticed this weird feeling in my body when people would say something like woo woo.
Mhm.
And it's something I started saying too, because everyone around me was saying it. And then I'm like, wait, why am I saying that? No, it's not woo woo. It's actually like really ancient, sacred traditions that have not gotten the respect that they deserve because of colonizers coming in and saying our way of life is better than yours and all of your ceremonies are banned. They are now illegal. They're now outlawed, and you're considered like a devil worshiper if you're participating in something like blowing smoke medicine onto yourself or onto your children. And
Right.
yeah, and now it's being kind of popularized and co-opted by folks who are not from indigenous lineage, which is I think there's a place for appreciation, and again we can get into that, but we do see a lot of this sort of like disrespect, which I also think turns off a lot of Indigenous folks from partaking in this industry.
Yes. That is something I forgot, but you had mentioned when I was in one of your roundtables before about, look around, if you were running a coaching consulting business right now and you were looking at like, well, how do I get more leads in and how am I getting more clients for tomorrow's business? And you're looking around and everyone looks or talks like you,
Yeah.
there's a chance that you are actually alienating people from BIPOC communities. Like I'm speaking as myself, like there's other people that are listening, but I am like a cis, white, able-bodied, gendered woman and midlife, raised by a single mom, all those things. But I'm a single mother. But at the end of the day, I appear, and many of my clients, I will honestly say 90% of them are reflective of me. We all have our variations and our different heritage backgrounds, but I would say as far as like how we show up on a Zoom screen, look, talk, walk like me. And so it's like if I want to see something different in my business, if I want to continue to have a business, because I think that's the other thing that you've shared with me is the stats. I mean, there's a
Yes.
factor there. All the stats as far as world global population, it's no longer white, cis is the majority. So if you want to be in business for tomorrow, you need to think about working with other people and expanding your perspectives.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's just fill folks who are listening in on that. That's what
Yeah.
Brenda's mentioning is I often refer to BIPOC or Black Indigenous people of color as the global majority, which is a term coined by Rosemary Campbell Stevens. And it was coined to essentially point out the fact that Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks and Asian folks, basically non-European folks, actually make up more than 80% of the global population. So even though we might be quote unquote minorities.
Mhm.
Um, Terms like minority, like we might be in minorities in our area, in our country, or in our province, wherever we are. But globally, we make up more than 80% of the population. And so if you have a global business, which you do, if you're online and you're open to people internationally, as I am, as many coaches and leaders are,
Mhm.
then that's a huge market waiting to be tapped into, waiting to be served. And so yeah, it's really important to really like let that sink in. And also like terms like ethnic minorities or people of color is like minority compared to what? Color compared to what? You're still
Right.
centering whiteness. So
Yeah.
I love that that term global majority takes us away from that.
Yeah. And I think that's some of the value add that people will get from attending your roundtable. We're talking about this roundtable. We should give a little context to it. So it's like, well,
Thanks.
what's this roundtable all about? But we will. Is like if you haven't thought about these things for your business, you really should as a business owner if you're thinking about the viability of your business, but not just for that reason. But you talk
Yeah.
about on your website, if you want to be in the business of also doing good, if you're a coach, you're in the practice of doing good for people.
Mhm.
You're not just making another thing that we need in our house, like Amazon is selling.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're doing something that's going to change people's lives. I mean, that's technically why you went into sort of coaching or consulting. Um,
Exactly.
so I wanted to talk about the roundtable at the end, but let's just bring it in right now because it fits. We've mentioned it a couple of times. What is this roundtable? What can people learn and expect from it, and why should they go?
Okay. Yes, thank you. The roundtable is a virtual gathering. I started it in October of 2022, and now it's about to run for the fifth time live, live on Zoom. It's virtual, but it's a two-part gathering, and essentially we unpack how colonialism shows up in your coaching business specifically. We also have therapists, we have musicians, we have healers and space holders of all kinds. So not just coaches, but it attracts a lot of people in this space. And yeah, we spend well, it used to be an hour, then it shifted to 90 minutes, and now it's 2 hours the first
Wow.
day,
Nice.
just to unpack, yeah, what is colonialism? What is decolonizing? What does decolonizing look like in coaching? I share a lot of my story, and then I give sort of tangible, practical ways that you can apply decolonization to your coaching business as a sort of entry point. And then, of course, I have a signature program where we go deeper into each of these things. But I think the roundtable is so great because it really gives people that big overview and a great introduction into doing this work. And then it gives tangible takeaways. So that's the first day. And then on the second day, we hear from panelists, which is why I called it the roundtable. Even though I like to think more like we're sitting around a sacred fire than a table, because the table kind of feels very like corporate. like we're sitting at a
Yes.
boardroom table or something. But I named it that the first time, and the program has gotten so big. I'm just like, oh, I can't change the name now because people know it. So we're sticking with the name. But the second day is a panelist day, and we hear from 3 or 4 different folks of the global majority who are also in the coaching industry, either as your fellow, your fellow coaches or leaders, and we've also all been clients ourselves. So I try to have people from different backgrounds each time and providing their lens, their lived experiences, and together we're coming together to, with love and with compassion and grace, but with radical honesty,
Mm,
in just sharing like exactly what are the things that make us feel excluded, what are the things that make us feel included or seen or supported, and how your business can better attract and serve and support people of the global majority. And people with different different lived experiences than you. So it's such a magical thing. And I think it's been so popular and it's done so well because it's so radically honest. It's You don't see a lot of these conversations happening, and there aren't space for these conversations to safely happen in a lot of the spaces I was in, which is kind of why this whole thing started. And so yeah, it's been really beautiful.
yeah, and I would echo that as a participant that's gone through it twice. I've seen a recorded session and then I went through a live session with you. And you do create, and the speakers that you bring in do create a very safe space because, some people, and I'll just say this, I mean, like we have an accountability, I think, as white coaches out there to learn the origins of the practices that we are taking forward to other people, other cultures, and to create those safe spaces. But I also know that there were some things that I was just like, I was completely unaware of. And as much as it was like it opened a light bulb for me, it also made me feel a little bit of guilt, shame that I just kind of took the teachings, the practice that I had learned from somebody else without, taking some responsibility and accountability for where that originated from. So I think sometimes people might, well, I don't want to feel bad about what I'm doing. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to know that I've done something wrong. But at the same time, it does open you up to continually learning. And I think as coaches, consultants, teachers, practitioners out there, that is also what we signed up for, is to continue to be learning. Like we just don't learn to be a coach one day and then never get better at it. This helps us get better, is also looking at some of the things we don't know how to do, maybe where we are at fault, but we have the opportunity to correct it because we're going to be with you and your other teachers that you're bringing in this safe space to kind of unpack it and explore it and
Yeah.
unpack. I don't like that word either, but I shouldn't use that. But just like really explore it.
Yeah.
And and also forgive ourselves. Like, hey, okay, maybe you
Yeah.
didn't know this, but now you
Yeah.
do, and now you can make something better because of that.
Yes. Thank you for that. And that's something I strive to do, is create a sort of an unshaming environment and lens where we are being radically honest and boldly telling these truths that, I mean, people have been sharing them for a long time, but often they go unheard,
Hmm.
or they do go unsaid because of the fear of the spaces then not being safe once we bring up topics like race or gender or ability. And so thank you for that sort of reminder for me too, to just preface these conversations and lead these conversations with a ton of grace. And it's a good reminder for all of us that we're all always sharpening our skills.
Hmm.
And that is how you grow your business. There's so much focus on investing in your business, investing in your sales skills in this
Hmm.
industry of coaching. There's been so much hyper focus, and I love business growth too. And I'm always investing in business mentorship, but there's a hyper focus on that part where if you actually focus on sharpening your skills as a coach, you're going to hold safer, more transformational space for people. Your clients are going to get better transformations. They're going to rave about you to their friends and their networks because they just can't
Hmm.
help it. And your business will naturally grow anyway. So like it's good. It's a good thing to do. Like it's good for the world. It's good to recognize your role in decolonization in your corner of the world, which might be coaching if you're listening to this.
Hmm.
And it's just good business sense too. So I
Yeah.
really think it's just a win-win.
So for you, I mean, because the I guess I don't want to say angle, but the approach that you take around your business around decolonizing your coaching practice,
Yeah.
And if I know your past, and I don't know it intimately, but from what you've shared with me and what I've heard before, is that, you came into the coaching industry and you were following tools, practices, frameworks that coaches before you were sharing with you, but you were
Mhm.
also feeling a little bit of like that ickiness, like things were not necessarily settling well with you.
Yeah.
And then you approach this decolonization work, right? Just through your own ancestral upbringing, like, bringing that forward more. And so how has that shifted your business? Because some people might be saying, well, no, 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 you need to have a sales focus in your business, Emily. And what you're saying is that I shouldn't be following capitalistic ways, but now I'm not gonna be able to make money. Like, but you've been successful in your business. You get people filling up your roundtables, coming to your offers. You've created new offers around how to build wealth now with your clients. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious because if we can go kind of behind the scenes into your business, how has this decolonization work benefited you as a business owner?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, Brenda, is that I've shifted focus from hyper individualism, which is a
Mhm.
very colonial capitalistic way of going through the world and going through business. It's like every person for themselves. I gotta make my dreams happen. It's all on me. That's a big part of manifestation. What manifestation teachers often share too is like you and you alone are responsible for your reality. And if your
Mhm.
circumstances aren't how you want it, well, then you must have thought bad thoughts. You manifested it, or you didn't take enough
Right, your
action, or
limiting beliefs. Yeah.
your limiting beliefs. Yes, and I was like spewing all of this as well because
Mhm.
these are the books I read. This is the seminars I went to. I was steeped in it. But I think the biggest piece was the shift from A, decolonizing my own brain and heart and realizing, oh, there are actually systemic factors at play. There is actually ancestral trauma that I need to look at.
Right.
It's actually in my body, it's in my cells, it's not just in my mind.
Mhm.
Nobody worked harder on their mindset than me. I was just like a maniac with my daily affirmations and journaling and gratitude,
Right.
vision
Post
board,
post-it
all the
notes.
post-it notes, all the things. And so realizing, okay, it's not just the mind, and I've realized now that's the colonial spin on it.
Mhm.
But if we go back to Indigenous teachings, even looking at something like the medicine wheel, which is from our Anishinaabe brothers and sisters, like that really encompasses mind, body, spirit, and emotion. We need
Mhm.
all four. So that was huge. And the shift from individualism to community and collaboration, which
Mhm.
I think is a very indigenized approach.
Yes.
That has catapulted my business. Like you see every round table, um, I'm working with at least four other collaborators. This time there's four speakers and two other co-facilitators. So there's six people I'm collaborating with. And I don't put it on them to like, share, spread the word or anything like that. But just everything I do is in collaboration. And I find that because I'm so community focused, that's how my business has been growing.
Mhm.
It's just been a natural thing where we genuinely want to see each other win. I've been surrounding myself with people who believe in my mission and what I'm doing. And that's really helped the business grow a lot.
I love it. And it yeah, it is definitely, I think, bringing forward, like you said, the indigenous culture, customs that your people would have been doing. I mean, I've
Yeah.
studied with other First Nations folks, consultants in other parts of Canada, and if there was a problem in the community, it wasn't like one person to solve on their own, like or one household, like your household like got a problem or your
Yeah.
child's a problem. It was like the whole community would come together to
Yeah.
help, solve that
Yeah.
issue. And it wasn't even considered an issue. I think that's where I also go back to some of the threads that you've talked about as far as personal development. Like in organizations, the personal development world is like, oh, you've got your strengths and you've got your weaknesses.
Yeah.
But I've often, like, one of my weaknesses when I was a kid on my report card was always that I talk too much. Well, guess what? I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, like I've
Yeah.
been on stages. It's like it's actually like one of my strengths.
Yeah.
And, so it's like we've always been like working on our development and we have to like perfect ourselves and come up with this perfect model when really it's like we're humans and all of these things can be leveraged in different ways. So,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that is something Indigenous folks have I've always sort of known and respected is that we each bring unique gifts to the table. And it's not one way, it's not my way or the highway. It's hearing, taking our time, listening to each other's stories and appreciating each other's differences and gifts. And you're so right about the community care piece that you mentioned. Like if one in my home community, Tyendinaga, which is the reserve that I was lucky to be born and raised on. My whole family still lives there. I now live in the Greater Toronto area. But like if someone in our community, let's say their house burns down or I don't know, they've fallen on hard times and they need something, the whole community comes together to
Hmm.
support them. And I just kind of thought that was how it was. I thought like all towns, all communities operated like this, but I've realized since moving away from the reserve that that's really a special thing to us, and it's not really the colonial way. But this is why we all need to decolonize because obviously everyone, not just Indigenous folks, everyone does better when we focus on community care and collective liberation.
Yeah. I know some people that are in the health and wellness space, and you know, obviously, like many of us around the world have been touched by the pandemic over the last few years as far as COVID, but they're saying the greater pandemic is not actually like a disease like COVID, it's actually loneliness, right? So building community and being together and the social distancing that we had to go through during COVIDs and during lockdowns and stuff like that actually just tore us down even more as far as community. So like anything that you can do, I think, in your business to build back that community is important. But I think along with that is trust. So I was actually hearing a podcast from another consultant last week, and she talked about in the online business space, we're in this sort of trust deficit right now. It's like,
Yes,
especially in the coaching
yes,
space, like everyone was buying everyone's courses and joining everyone's masterminds and being a part of it all. And some I did and were great, and others were like, really? That's what I got for that? Or
yes.
I didn't, I got a lot of stuff, but I didn't necessarily feel great, or I never used it in my business. And so I
Yeah.
think there's a definitely a more discerning online shopper now in the coaching space. Um, how does decolonization rebuild that trust for people in your mind? Because I mean, we still want to have these viable businesses. Like I'm hearing from some of my clients, well, maybe I need to leave coaching because I can't make a go of it. I'm like, well, let's look at how you're coaching. Let's look at like, how you're attracting people. But how does that decolonization work rebuild the trust that's maybe been lost over the last few years in coaching?
Such a good question, Brenda. This is like, yeah, I could talk forever about this. Um, I really do believe it's the solution to everyone's. You're right, everyone's feeling this slower business right now. There is such a lack of trust. So many people have been burned.
Hmm.
And why have they been burned? Because the way that we were taught to do business, me included, I did some really like unaligned things when I was starting out in business and just doing what my coaches were telling me.
Hmm.
Like, for example, luring people onto a free call under the guise of it's a free call, it's free coaching, but really then at the end, pitch them your thing and don't tell them the price until the end of the call, which
Right.
it never felt good to me personally, but I was just operating in that way because that's what my coach said to do. And she was making 10K a month. So I was like, well, it must work.
Right.
But it just never felt good. It felt icky. And so I think there's a whole generation now of us coaches and leaders who were taught business from this very colonial lens.
Hmm.
And now after it's icky and it's not working for people. So many have been burned. Um, I don't think it's we need to stop coaching. I think it's we need to decolonize, like you said. And um, there's so much to break down in terms of what does decolonizing your business actually look like. Um, but it's basic things like people over profit, right? Not being extractive and transactional, but being relational, which again, a very Indigenous way of being. If you think back to something I talk about when I talk about decolonizing business is like we used to do trades instead of having money. Eventually we did have some sort of
Yeah, currency. Sure.
yeah, currency, but like everything was based on mutual gain, right? It wasn't like, oh, I'm tricking you and I'm taking this away. And it was like, well, you have extra fish, I have extra blankets. You need blankets, I need fish, let's do a trade. And
Yeah.
it benefited everyone. It didn't hurt the environment. It wasn't extracting from the environment. It wasn't extracting from other people. It wasn't abusing people.
Hmm.
And so I think just like it really comes down to like good old fashioned honesty, transparency, like good ethics. And yeah, the reason I label that decolonizing is because it is the colonizer's way of extraction, of harm, of power at all costs, any and all costs.
Yeah.
And that really did trickle into the coaching industry because if we look at where it was founded on, it was all like the Tony Robbins and the Bob Proctor and all white men
Hmm.
who bless their hearts, but they only knew the colonial way of being as well. And it was very much like, how can I get myself on top?
Yes.
And how can I teach other white men to get themselves on top and to
Mhm.
help the rich get richer? And so, of course, those toxic roots are going to be still present in what we know today, unless we unlearn them and then relearn, I think, through a more holistic lens, a more indigenous lens. And yeah, it's really um now more than ever, people are buying with their values. People are voting with their dollars. So
Mhm.
we're more aware than ever, thanks to social media and podcasts and conversations like this. We're
Yes.
more aware of what's happening in the world around us. We're more aware of like the truth behind all these companies that we've been supporting for years, right? Where our
Mhm.
clothes are made, where our food comes from, all of this. So people are really waking up and and with inflation and the rising cost of living, we're just being more careful with where we put our dollars. So if you're a business that's leading with your values and is clear with your values, taking actions aligned with your values,
Yes.
people see that. And that is what builds trust. Um, so I always say that it's three things, like it's mindset, it's words, and it's actions.
Hmm.
Decolonization is all three. Um, and actions also speak louder than words. Obviously, words alone is just performative allyship,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. But yeah, and I think it also, like, not to take over, but I think it's in your business, but then it's also in other areas of your life. Like you talked about, like, who are you
Yes.
voting for? What products are you buying? Like
Yes.
Kellogg's right now, 100-year-old business. They've lost 5% market share in the last like week with people complaining about, the US Fruit Loops is different than the Canadian one because it dyes and stuff like that, and food standards between Canada and the US, and Americans are saying, oh, I want to buy the Canadian box instead of the American one on our shelves. And I'm like, I don't blame
Yeah.
you. Like, that stuff your kids are eating. I
Yep.
mean, the stuff's crap anyways, but like, never mind the fact that the dyes are in it are terrible. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like, push
Exactly.
back with your dollar. So it should show up in your business. It should show up in the choices that you have in all areas of your life.
Mhm.
If we want to see like bigger systemic change. But I think I agree with you wholly. As a business owner, you can make a lot of changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see the performative side of this where we see things like greenwashing or rainbow washing, which is
Okay.
where
Yeah.
companies like claim, for example, rainbow washing on Pride Month. You'll
Hmm.
see the big corporate companies, they have rainbows on everything and they make it look like they are allies to the LGBTQIA community,
Right.
but really it's just like branding and it's just words and not so much action. And then you're hearing like toxic stuff that's happened behind the scenes, right?
With their
So it
employees or yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I think we run the risk of seeing performative decolonization or anti-racism work, and we saw a lot of it in 2020, when there was a big wave of, the Black Lives Matter. I hate calling it a movement, but for lack of a better term, I guess
Yeah, everyone had the black square, like good on
everyone
you.
had the Black Square.
But did you take it a step further by, okay, you know what, maybe instead of hiring, no offense out there to the white graphic designer, maybe I'm going to hire a BIPOC graphic designer today,
Yeah,
for my business, right? Like really making a difference that way. And well, in Canada, we have our truth and reconciliation, and as business owners, that's some of the things that it says in there. It's like we can actually choose to work with Indigenous led businesses if we want to help support truth and reconciliation.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's all three. It's unlearning. There's so much to unlearn about all the ways we were taught in general to operate in society, but also within business and within coaching. And then it's your actions for sure. Like who are you supporting? Where's your dollar going?
Mhm.
What are you doing to unlearn? What are you doing to pivot your modalities, to make your language more inclusive, to make your coaching sessions more safe? There's all these things actions you can take. And then your words matter too. Are you actually sharing? And this is the piece where most people get stuck. And they come to me and they say, Emily, I don't want to share about all the actions I'm doing because I don't want to seem performative.
Mhm.
But I'm like, no, but we need to know. Like, if I'm going to buy from, let's say, another white mentor or service provider, I actually really want to see on your website, like, I want to see you acknowledge your privilege or your identities, or acknowledge the unlearning you're doing. Who are you learning from?
Mhm.
What causes are you supporting? I want to and need to see that. So it's not performative if you actually are walking the walk.
Right.
So things, yeah, all of those things matter now more than ever.
I'm looking forward to this roundtable. So when is it happening again?
It is happening. So normally it's a 2-day thing. So the core 2 days is November 19th and 20th.
Okay.
And it's in the evening Eastern time. And there will be recordings. And then this year there's an option to upgrade to a 4-day pass, because
Mhm.
what I find is that there's so much packed into the 2 days. First of all, people show up to day one and they're like a ball of nerves. They're really nervous. I don't know if you can
I can
attest to
remember, I
that.
can relate. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready for the shoe to drop. Like I haven't been doing this stuff or yeah.
Yeah, so people show up a ball of nerves. So we added a pre-event lounge for people who
Okay.
want to upgrade their ticket, and we're gonna
Good.
do some somatic care, some movement, some getting your nerves out, getting your questions out, just
Awesome.
in a non-judgmental space. And then
Right.
we've added a day after the panelist day, so after day two. So this all comes in the 4-day pass, where we're gonna just go into breakout rooms. We're gonna have more time for you to get your questions answered,
That's
and
great.
it's like a unpack it together day, because I also found a lot of people, they leave the round table with like their jaw on the floor and they're like,
Yes, that was me.
what
And
did I
I'm like,
just, yeah,
I remember like texting you on Instagram going, what about this? What about this?
yeah. They're like left hanging a little bit. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to have the unpack it together day and see, just
Okay.
to give people a little more support after.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's
so
neat.
it's November 18th to 21st all together, and you can
Okay.
choose your own ticket, choose your own adventure,
Awesome.
if you want to join us. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll make sure we share the links with everybody in the show notes so people can sign up and register. And this will obviously come out before then, so they'll get it in time to be able to attend the session, which will be great. So couple last questions for you, because I know it's end of day for you and you got to wrap up your time
Yeah.
and rest your body and your mind. What does it look like for you over the next like 6 to 12 months in your business? What are some things that you're really excited about? I'm always interested in what other business owners' goals are.
Oh, thanks. That's a cool question. I am really excited to keep simplifying my business and streamlining my business and leaning into what's already working. So I was originally planning all these other little side courses and projects and things, and it was really pulling my energy in a bunch of different directions. So I'm now excited that I've decided, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. The round table is so good and it's working, and it gets a different spin on it every time anyway, because there's new panelists and there's new
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
And then the Decolonized Coach community, that's my signature community. I'm really going to be just like pouring into, this is another piece of decolonizing, is that I've really learned to open myself up to community feedback. So I've pulled the community there's already around 50 members in the Decolonized Coach community. I've asked them, like, what do you like? What do you want to see more of? What needs to be improved? What would help you feel safer on calls? And I've gotten a lot of great feedback. So I'm excited to sort of implement that feedback in the new year, and just keep making, just keep refining and leaning into what's already working, and making DCC the best it can be, making the roundtable the best it could be. So I'll probably still continue launching roundtable and DCC live twice a
Mhm.
year. And then my other big project is a book. I'm going to be writing a book on all of this, which is essentially,
Exciting.
yeah, my free ebook, which I know you probably have. We'll link it
Mhm.
up for folks too. But the ebook, as I was writing that, it's, I don't know, 15 pages or something. I was like, wow, each of these could be chapters of a
For
book. Like, I
sure.
could
Yeah.
say so much more on each of these, and I have stories and things to weave in.
Right.
So that's going to be turning into a book.
Amazing. So exciting for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Emily, I've got one last question for you and then we'll wrap up. So, but I just want to say it's been amazing. It's always a great experience being able to talk to you. And again, this was like fangirl moment, big check on my page, put it out there and it actually happened. So I'm just want to encourage people, if there's a goal that you have, if there's someone that you want to collaborate with in your business this year, just like go do it. It's going to be fabulous. It's always going to turn out. I'm still alive at the end of this process, so it's all good.
Yeah. Oh.
But my last question for you is if I was to give you a billboard and you could put anything on it and it could be anywhere in the world, what would it say and where would you put
Ooh.
it?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. That's a good question. I think something I say a lot is, and I say this on my podcast, your ripple effect matters. I
Mm,
really want people to know how much you might feel like you're a small drop in the ocean, right? You're just one person. And sometimes we get so focused on it's overwhelming. I get overwhelmed all the time thinking about all the issues that there is to solve in the world, and we
sure.
can get caught up thinking we have to solve the world's problems. But just remember the ripple that happens from one drop in the water, right? And how much that matters. So I guess it would be your ripple effect matters, and I don't know where I would put it. Somewhere that everyone would see it, somewhere high traffic,
Yeah,
maybe a digital screen somewhere.
right.
Um, but that's really something I would want people to know. And actually, Michelle Obama, I was just watching an interview of her and Oprah, and she said something that I didn't know how much I needed to hear it. She said, focus on your knitting. She really got into knitting during
Mm,
the pandemic. And she said, your knitting's like what's right in front of you.
yeah,
Focus on what's right in front of you. You don't have to go like solve the world's problems in a day. But
hmm,
when I always say like keep, or what's the saying? Keep your side of the street clean.
yeah,
That's kind of how I look at what I'm doing, because I know there's so much that needs to be decolonized and so many world problems that need to be solved, but my little corner of the world that I love is
hmm,
coaching and it's personal development, and it means so much to me. It's done so much for me in my life that I see that as like a love letter to give back to this space that I'm in. And so for everyone listening, what's that for you? What's that little corner of your world that you can make a little better? And don't underestimate how much your voice matters and how much your impact matters.
absolutely. Well, I think it goes back to what you were talking about before, like your thoughts, your words, your actions, like that action, right? If you're always in action, even if it's like you're knitting right in front of you,
Yeah.
it just keeps you going. It actually also tells your brain that you can do a bigger project. You can knit the sweater, now you can knit the blanket. Now you can like, so it's like you can continue to like add to it, but just like, yeah, stay in action. It's the biggest thing. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on here today. I can't wait to attend your roundtable. Good luck with everything over the next 2 weeks as you're like filling people up to go to it. And yeah, have fun during it because it's going to be so exciting with all these great speakers and all these great attendees. I wish you well. Take care.
Thank you.